The world had not just ended, it had shattered into a million sharp, glittering pieces, each one reflecting a different lie. Christine sat on the cold, hard marble of the mansion's grand foyer, her body numb. The hidden file's contents were scattered around her like the fallout from a bomb. Photographs of her from a year ago, a cold, clinical report on her life, and the damning handwritten note. The wallet is the best approach. She is too honest to keep it, asterisk. A sound, raw and guttural, tore from her throat. It was a wail of pure, unadulterated betrayal that echoed through the vast, empty house. This was not the pain of a man being arrested. This was the agony of a universe collapsing. Every tender touch, every shared laugh, every whispered promise of a future, all of it was a script he had written before they had even met. Rodrigo hadn't stumbled into her life. He had stalked it, studied it, and then orchestrated their entire chance encounter with the cold precision of a general planning a siege. He hadn't fallen in love. He had become obsessed, and he had trapped her in a beautiful, gilded cage built on a foundation of deceit. She was utterly alone. The city's newspapers painted her as a cunning traitor who had sold out her husband. The few friends she'd had before this world had long since been scared away. And beneath the heartbreak, a new, terrifying reality was taking root, a fluttering, nauseating secret in her womb. She was pregnant. Pregnant with the child of the man who had looked her in the eye and built their life on a lie. The irony was so cruel it stole her breath. It was in this storm of absolute despair that a life raft appeared, dressed in a crisp, clean suit and offering a steady hand. Agent Mark Russo of the FBI found her there, crumpled on the floor like a discarded doll. He didn't flash his badge or bark orders. He simply knelt, his voice a low, calming anchor in her chaos. "Christine," he said, his eyes filled with a sympathy that felt like a bomb on a burn. "I know you're scared. I know you feel trapped. But I can get you out. Witness protection. A new name, a new life in a small town where no one has ever heard the name Conti. You can have safety. A normal life for you and for your baby." His gaze flickered to her stomach, and she realized he already knew. "All you have to do is help me. Tell the truth about Rodrigo's operation." He offered a hand. It was clean, strong, and promised a world without lies or danger. It was everything Rodrigo was not. It was the logical choice, the safe choice. And yet, her treacherous heart, still tied to the man in prison by 1,000 invisible strings, clenched in protest. While Agent Mark Russo gently, patiently pressured her to testify, another, more dangerous plan began to smolder in the ashes of Christine's heart. Running and hiding felt like letting Rodrigo's lie win. She had to know why. She had to understand the full architecture of the trap she'd been living in. She reached out to the only person she had left who knew the truth of this world. Carlo, Rodrigo's most trusted bodyguard, a mountain of a man whose loyalty was now a question mark. In secret, hidden in the mansion's soundproofed basement, a place Rodrigo had shown her in a moment of trust that now felt like another part of the act, they began to dig. Carlo, his face a mask of grim determination, provided access to encrypted files and secure communication lines. Christine provided the desperate, furious need for answers. They were an unlikely team, a betrayed woman and a loyal soldier, sifting through the digital ghost of Rodrigo's empire. The trail of evidence was a spiderweb, intricate and sticky, but every single thread led back to one man, Donato. Rodrigo's own consigliere, his most trusted advisor, the man who had stood by his side for a decade. Donato was the puppet master. He had secretly ordered the hit on Marco Andretti, knowing the perfect, fabricated evidence would point directly to Rodrigo. He had been the reliable source who tipped off the FBI. And his motive was simple, ancient, and cruel: power. He had seen Rodrigo's love for Christine as a fatal weakness, a crack in the armor of the great Conti Empire. And he had used Christine, the innocent waitress, as the perfect, unsuspecting pawn to shatter it completely and seize the throne for himself. Knowing the truth was a weapon, but proving it was the battle. Donato was now the unchallenged king, and he watched her with the cold, unblinking eyes of a cobra. Christine knew she couldn't just expose him. He was too powerful, too protected. She had to get close. She had to be smarter, more cunning, and more daring than she had ever been in her life. She had to play the greatest role of her life. She made her move at the Onyx Crown, the club that had once been Rodrigo's sanctuary and was now Donato's throne room. She walked in, her chin held high, the ghost of the scared waitress buried under a mask of cold fury. She faced him in the center of the room, surrounded by his men, her voice cutting through the low hum of conversation. "Rodrigo played me for a fool," she declared, letting a well-practiced tremor of bitter anger into her words. "He used me as a pretty toy, and then he thought I would wait for him like a faithful dog while he rots in prison? I'm done. I want what I'm owed, Donato. You have the vision he lost. Teach me. Let me help you run what should have been mine from the beginning." Donato studied her, his expression unreadable. He slowly swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his gaze crawling over her face, looking for the trap. What he saw, what she made him see, was a greedy, scorned woman, a simple creature of emotion who could be easily controlled. To him, she was a harmless, useful pet, a symbol of his victory over Rodrigo. A slow, calculating smile spread across his face. "The student has become the master," he said, his voice slick. "Welcome to the table, Christine." From a distance, Agent Mark watched this public performance. He saw her denounce the monster he wanted to put away, and he felt a surge of vindication and hope. He believed, with all his heart, that Christine was finally choosing the light, stepping out of the darkness for good. The prison visiting room was a cage of despair, smelling of bleach and hopelessness. When Rodrigo was led in, shackled and dressed in drab prison orange, Christine's breath hitched. The man she loved was gone. In his place was a sculpture of pure ice. His stormy eyes, once warm with love for her, were now frozen tundras of hatred. He didn't sit. He loomed. "You have some nerve showing your face here, traitor," he spat, the words like shards of glass. "Rodrigo, you have to listen to me," she pleaded, leaning forward, her voice a desperate whisper meant only for him. "Nothing is what it seems. The walls have ears, but you have to trust me." "Trust you?" He let out a harsh, ugly laugh that made the guard shift his weight. "I gave you my name. I gave you my world. And you sold me for a deal with the feds. Was it worth it? Did they promise you a pretty little house with a white picket fence away from the monster?" Frustration and heartbreak boiled over, hot and acidic. He was so blind, so stubborn. He was looking at the puppet show and missing the puppet master. In a moment of pure, angry despair, she slammed her palms flat on the scarred table between them. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. "I'm pregnant." The words were a detonation inside Rodrigo. The cold, controlled shell of the man who had accepted his fate shattered. The primal beast, the Mafia king who had built an empire on sheer will, erupted from the wreckage. The mental image of Donato touching Christine, the thought of his child being harmed, it was an inferno in his veins, burning away all reason, all patience. He demanded an immediate meeting. Not with a lawyer, but with the most powerful man on the cell block, a rival boss named Silvano, a man he had warred with for a decade over territory and respect. Through the concrete wall that separated them, Rodrigo made his offer, his voice stripped of all pride, vibrating with a raw, desperate need. "Silvano," he yelled, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Hear me. My empire. My businesses. My territories. All of it. I will sign a blood oath. I will give you every last dollar, every last asset. It is all yours." Silvano's laughter, deep and mocking, echoed back. "You would give me everything, Conti? For what?" A few more breaths of this stale air. Rodrigo pressed his forehead against the cold, rough stone, his voice dropping to a broken, desperate whisper. "Not for me. For my family. Get me out of here tonight. Give me 5 men. That is all I ask. Get me to them." The silence from the other side was long and heavy, filled with the weight of the unprecedented offer. Then, a single word came back, sealing the fate of the city. "Done." That night, a carefully orchestrated riot erupted, a perfect storm of smoke, confusion, and diverted guards. In the midst of the chaos, Rodrigo Conti, dressed in a guard's uniform that smelled of someone else's sweat, walked out of the gates a free man. He had traded his entire kingdom for a sword and a chance. And that was all he needed. He was coming for his queen. The city, which had grown accustomed to Donato's cold, calculated rule, now held its breath as a storm named Rodrigo Conti was unleashed. His escape from prison wasn't a quiet slip into the shadows. It was an earthquake. His first move was not a tender reunion with Christine. It was a declaration of war written in fire and blood. A warehouse on the docks, the heart of Donato's new smuggling operation, was the first to burn, the flames painting the night sky in angry orange. The next night, 2 of Donato's most feared enforcers were found disarmed and terrified, left tied up on the steps of the police precinct with signed confessions pinned to their chests. Rodrigo was systematically dismantling Donato's empire, not from the top down, but from the bottom up, proving his reach was longer, his will stronger. He was a ghost of vengeance, and his message was clear: the true king had returned, and he was taking back his throne piece by shattered piece. Christine watched the news reports from a sterile safe house, her heart a battlefield of fear and a treacherous, blooming hope. Each burning building was a testament to Rodrigo's power, but also to his distance. Why hadn't he come for her? Agent Mark Russo stood across from her, his arms crossed. The kindness in his eyes had been replaced by a flinty hardness. "You knew," he stated, his voice chillingly flat. "You knew he was planning this, and you used my protection as a shield while you and Carlo helped him. You played me this whole time." The safe, normal life he offered now felt like a locked door she had thrown away the key to. He saw her not as a victim, but as a willing accomplice, her pregnancy a shield for her deception. "When I find him, Christine," Mark said, his voice low and final, "I'm taking you both in. The deal is off." She was trapped, a pawn once more, caught between the law she respected and the vengeful, untamable storm of a man she still, impossibly loved. Rodrigo's war had one final, poetic target. He had Carlo, now bandaged and moving with a painful limp, deliver a single, stark message to Donato: "Meet me where it began. Just you and me. We finish this the old way." The dusty, closed-down diner, with its memories of coffee and French fries, was where a wallet had been left, a beautiful lie had been set in motion, and now, it would be where the final, ugly truth was settled. Under the flickering, broken neon of the open sign, the 2 men faced each other. This wasn't a strategic battle between bosses, it was a raw, personal and brutal brawl. They fought like animals, their struggle sending Formica tables skidding and shattering glasses that had once held Christine's coffee. Rodrigo fought with the furious strength of a man betrayed in his own home, his blows fueled by the image of Donato cornering Christine. Donato fought with the desperate, cornered rage of a usurper who knew his stolen crown was about to be ripped away. Finally, with a guttural roar, Rodrigo disarmed him, slamming Donato onto the very table where Christine had found his wallet. "You took everything from me," Rodrigo growled, pressing his gun to Donato's forehead, his finger tightening on the trigger. The roar of an engine and the screech of tires sliced through the tension. Headlights illuminated the dusty diner like a stage. Mark's car skidded to a halt. He burst through the door, his service weapon held in a 2-handed grip, aimed directly at Rodrigo's chest. "Conti, let him go. Drop the weapon now. It's over." But Mark's focus wasn't just on Rodrigo. He had brought Christine, believing the sight of her in danger would be the one thing to break the Mafia boss's resolve. Instead, her presence broke the scene wide open. Now, all 3 paths, forbidden love, unwavering law, and bloody vengeance, violently collided in the middle of the dusty diner where it had all begun. "Christine, get back from him," Mark yelled, his voice strained, his aim unwavering on Rodrigo. Rodrigo's eyes, wild and dark from the fight, flickered from his target to hers. In that fleeting glance, Christine didn't see the cold, calculating boss. She saw the man who had learned to smile again, who had whispered dreams of a family, the man who had traded his entire kingdom for the mere chance to save her. She saw the man who, despite his unforgivable lie, had become her home. Mark saw their locked gaze, the unspoken communication that passed between them, and his heart sank. He had lost her before he ever really had her. He made his final play, his voice tight with a desperate, heartbroken finality. "Christine, look at me. It's over. This ends now. Come with me right now," and I let him walk. He can disappear. You can have your life with him. Or you stay by his side, and I swear to you, I will take you both in. It's him or a future. You have to choose. It was the impossible choice, laid bare on the greasy diner floor. To her right was safety, freedom, and a lawful, peaceful life for her child, offered by a truly good man. To her left was the dangerous, passionate, and deeply flawed love of the man who had rewritten her world with a lie, but had just fought a bloody war across the city to make that lie real. The silence in the diner was absolute, broken only by Donato's ragged breathing and the hum of the old refrigerators. Christine looked at Mark, at his honest, anguished face, at the promise of a peaceful dawn he represented. Then her eyes returned to Rodrigo, battered and bleeding but standing unbroken, his entire being poised on her verdict. He didn't speak, didn't plead. He simply waited, offering her the choice he had never given her before. She took a step. The floorboard creaked under her weight. Then another. She walked slowly, deliberately, past Mark, her shoulder brushing against his still outstretched arm. She never broke eye contact with Rodrigo as she came to stand beside him, her posture straight. She placed a steadying hand on his arm, feeling the tense, ready muscle beneath the torn sleeve. "I'm not leaving him," she said, her voice quiet but absolute, echoing in the hollow space. Mark's face crumbled. The professional mask shattered, revealing the devastated man beneath. The fight drained out of him. With a heartbroken sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all his failed hopes, he began to lower his gun. The choice was made. She had chosen her king. It was this single moment of defeated inattention that the wounded snake on the table had waited for. With a gurgling, wet laugh of pure spite, Donato used the last of his strength to roll over, his hand darting to a small, hidden derringer in an ankle holster. "If I can't have it, no one will," he screamed, his voice cracking. He aimed the tiny, vicious barrel not at Rodrigo, but directly at Christine's heart. A single, deafening shot rang out. But it wasn't Rodrigo who fired. He was a fraction of a second too slow, his own gun still transitioning from Donato's head. Mark Russo, the FBI agent, the man of the law, reacted with something faster than duty, deeper than training. He threw himself forward, placing his own body directly in the path of the bullet, becoming a shield for Christine just as the derringer spat its fire. The bullet meant for her heart struck him squarely in the chest with a sickening thud. Time fractured. Mark staggered back, his eyes wide with shock, then found Christine's. There was no anger in them, no accusation, only a deep, profound, and infinite sadness. His legs gave way and he collapsed to the dusty floor. Christine screamed, falling to her knees beside him, her hands desperately pressing against the warm, rapidly spreading stain on his crisp white shirt. "No, please," she sobbed, her tears falling onto his face. He gave one final, shallow breath, his gaze locked on her face, a silent, tragic farewell. Then he was still. He had spent his entire life upholding the law, but in his final, selfless second, he had broken its every rule for the only thing that had ever truly mattered: love. Rodrigo's own shot followed a split second later, a roar of thunder that slammed into Donato and silenced his laughter forever. But in the sudden, ringing silence that followed, the only sound that remained was Christine's quiet, shattered sobs, as she cradled the head of the good man who had died to save the woman who loved another. The sound of the gunshots seemed to hang in the air of the diner long after the echo faded. Christine knelt on the gritty floor, Mark's head cradled in her lap, her hands stained with his blood. Rodrigo stood over Donato's still body, his chest heaving, the fury slowly draining from him to be replaced by a chilling emptiness. The war was over, but the cost was laid out before them in tragic, brutal clarity. Rodrigo moved first. Gently, he pried Christine's shaking hands from Mark's shirt and pulled her to her feet. "We have to go. Now." There was no time for grief. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawn by the gunfire. He led her, numb and stumbling, out the back door and into a waiting car Carlo had secured. They disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness, leaving behind the two fallen men, one a villain, one a hero, in the place where their twisted fairy tale had begun. They fled the city, not for a glamorous hideout, but for a quiet, weathered cottage on a remote stretch of the Oregon coast. It was a world away from marble mansions and neon-lit clubs. The air smelled of salt and pine, and the only sound was the relentless crash of the waves. The first weeks were a heavy silence. Christine moved through the small rooms like a ghost, haunted by Mark's final, sorrowful gaze. Rodrigo gave her space, his own guilt a solid wall between them. He cooked simple meals, ensured she was safe, but they were two planets orbiting a shared tragedy, unable to bridge the gap. The change began on a stormy night. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and Christine woke from a nightmare, crying out. Rodrigo was there in an instant, not with words, but by simply gathering her into his arms. She finally let herself cry, great, heaving sobs for Mark, for their broken trust, for the terrifying future. He held her through it all, his own tears falling silently into her hair. "I am so sorry, Christine," he whispered, his voice raw. "For the first lie. For every lie that came after. My love for you is the only real thing I have ever had." It was the crack they needed. The wall began to crumble. They started talking, truly talking for the first time. Not as a waitress and a mafia boss, but as a man and a woman who had lost everything but each other. Months later, on a calm morning with sunlight dancing on the ocean, Christine went into labor. There was no hospital, only a retired midwife from the nearby town. Rodrigo never left her side, his large hand clutching hers, his face pale with a fear no rival gang had ever inspired. When their daughter's first cry pierced the room, a strong, healthy wail, a sound escaped Rodrigo's lips that was half sob, half laugh. They named her Serena, for the peace they had fought so hard to find. As Rodrigo held his daughter for the first time, his massive hand sleeve cradling her tiny head, the last remnants of the Mafia boss melted away. He was no longer Rodrigo Conti, the feared king of a dark empire. He was just a father, humbled and awestruck by the perfect, new life in his arms. Christine watched them, her heart so full it ached. This was their fresh start, forged in fire and sealed with a promise. 5 years later, the peace was deep and real. Serena was a whirlwind of laughter and questions, chasing seagulls on the beach. They lived a simple, honest life, their past a shadow that had finally been outrun by the light of their present. On Serena's 5th birthday, a familiar black car pulled up the dusty road to the cottage. Carlo stepped out, older, his gait still marked by a slight limp, but his eyes held their familiar loyalty. He didn't come with threats or demands. He handed Rodrigo a simple, sealed envelope. "The accounts you hid before the fall," Carlo said quietly. "The legitimate ones. They're yours. The family, what's left of it, they've gone straight. They want you to lead them. The right way." Rodrigo looked at Christine, who was watching from the porch, a small, knowing smile on her face. He looked back at Carlo and shook his head. "I have everything I need right here." But Christine spoke up, her voice clear and sure. "Take it, Rodrigo." He looked at her, surprised. "You traded your empire for us," she said, walking to his side and taking his hand. "But that doesn't mean you can't build a new one. A better one. For her." She nodded toward Serena, who was building a sandcastle with intense concentration. "A legacy she can be proud of." Rodrigo looked from his wife's determined face to his daughter's innocent one, and he understood. Their forever wasn't about hiding. It was about building. He took the envelope from Carlo, not as a return to the past, but as a blueprint for a future built not on fear, but on the unshakable foundation of their love. The final scene showed him later that evening, not in a suit commanding a boardroom, but in a sweater, kneeling in the sand, teaching a laughing Serena how to skip a stone into the rising tide. Christine watched them, the setting sun painting them in gold. He had started their story with a lie, but he had spent every day since proving his truth. Their love had been a battlefield, but from the ashes, they had forged a forever that was finally, completely and powerfully theirs. This wild journey of lies, love, and redemption has reached its end. We have to know, what did you think? Were you on the edge of your seat? Did Christine make the right choice? Let us know your thoughts and leave a rating in the comments below. Your feedback is so important to us. And if you loved this dramatic, twist-filled tale of a mafia boss and his waitress, you absolutely have to watch the next story we have for you. It's a unique and breathtaking new romance that we know you will adore. Click on the video above to watch it now.